Hey everyone, today I am going to talk about how to choose a safe ayahuasca retreat, especially when the internet is saturated in five-star retreats. For instance, on Retreat Guru, let's look up ayahuasca. While that loads, this one already loaded. This is third wave retreat directory. I mean, all of these have five-star reviews, not many five-star reviews, but I think it's a new directory, and at a certain point, you just start to wonder if they're really all that incredible, um, or if you can trust the reviews, right? Retreat Guru, I think, is a more established directory, and it has. But again, if you look at all the reviews, most of these retreats have 5-star reviews, 4.5 star, and there's over 400 retreats to choose from. I mean, it gets overwhelming. So how do you choose a safe ayahuasca retreat? And while there are all of these options available, there are many stories of pretty sketchy, if not outright dangerous, ayahuasca experiences. So, finding a place that is safe and authentic is becoming more and more important. For full disclosure, I would like to say that I represent Alma Healing Center, which is based in Ecuador and organizes ayahuasca retreats and other plant medicine retreats with trusted healers. So the information I am providing in this video is not completely objective. However, that said, one of our priorities is to ensure that ayahuasca retreats remain safe for people. We hope that the information in this video can just help you choose a safe retreat center wherever that may be. You're also encouraged to get in touch with us if you are interested in an ayahuasca retreat in Ecuador. But all of the information shared applies mostly to retreat centers in Latin America, including Ecuador, Peru, Costa Rica, Colombia, Mexico. Not so much the States. Things operate differently in the States, and I'd rather not even touch on that. My first tip is to make sure you do your research months in advance and make sure you ask a lot of questions. Um, there are many more legitimate ayahuasca retreat centers than you will find on Google Maps or Google search results, and they're just not as visible because they don't have marketing budgets or they don't have volunteers that are writing blogs ranking for keywords like the best ayahuasca retreat center in Ecuador or something. And I know of numerous authentic and very safe ayahuasca retreat centers that don't even have a website, sorry, and are run by a family or a couple that are also the healers that run the ceremony. So they simply just don't have the time or the know-how to create a website or create listings on Retreat Guru and Third Wave. And what they're doing is preparing ayahuasca, preparing San Pedro, helping and healing people, working with chronically ill patients. That's exactly what they should be doing because they're healers. I would like to encourage you to keep an open mind when you're looking. Don't just go for the one of the top 5-star review. Or another tip, especially for Latin America, is to use Facebook. So not just rely on Google Maps or Google search results. In Latin America, Facebook is very popular as it is elsewhere, and you will find many groups um, about ayahuasca where individuals or retreat centers are sharing about upcoming retreats or upcoming ceremonies, sometimes temazcales, not necessarily just ayahuasca retreats. So for instance, you could go onto Facebook, search groups for the term ayahuasca Peru. You'll find a handful, find one with a large number of members, and then you can ask questions there. And even if you don't speak Spanish, you're more than likely going to find somebody that can speak to you in English. And it'll just give you other options to choose from, apart from the more popular directories or Google Maps. My next tip is whenever possible, try to speak to someone on the phone. It really helps to hear someone's voice and ask a few specific questions that are important to you and hear those responses. Most retreat centers won't be able to offer extended Q&A phone sessions or answer every single question you have. I think that's understandable because they might not have the capacity in terms of their staff. But just hearing that there is somebody else on the other line, sometimes hearing their voice, their tone, it makes a difference. So when you can, try to do that. Another important point is to determine your priorities and expectations in advance. This is actually should probably be number one on the list. Make sure you ask yourself, like, understand what you want from the experience. So ask yourself, where would I want to drink ayahuasca? Like, in what natural setting? And I say natural because it really should be a natural setting. That's especially if you're traveling to Latin America, try to go somewhere in a beautiful natural setting. There are many options. And for instance, the Amazon rainforest is a really great one. I love drinking ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest. However, for first timers, it can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot going on in the Amazon rainforest, and then um, when you amplify all your senses, which is what happens on ayahuasca, it can feel quite overwhelming. The beach is also a nice option. Um, the cloud forest is kind of like the Amazon rainforest, but a little, everything's a little smaller and a little tamer. I actually really like the cloud forest too for drinking medicine. And what I suggest is going somewhere that's relatively warm. Um, Drinking in the cold, drinking ayahuasca in the cold, can be quite uncomfortable simply because already the medicine tends to drop your body temperature. And um, yeah, you just have to be very well clothed and have a warm sleeping bag if you're going to be drinking in the Andean region, at least in Ecuador and Peru. So yeah, I would choose something a little warmer and surrounded by nature. Other questions that you might want to ask yourself are, what level of comfort do you think you need? Um, After several nights of ceremony, you're going to want to have a soft pillow. Um, but at some point, it doesn't even matter. At some point, actually, you're kind of beyond that. You're so exhausted. But of course, some people prefer more luxurious settings. And alternatively, you could also go drink at and with an indigenous community. And in that setting, you might expect accommodation and facilities to be more basic, but the experience might also be more authentic. That said, make sure you always have somebody that can translate things for you. In that case, if you don't speak Spanish, often in indigenous communities in the Amazon, their Spanish isn't very strong either. So even if you do speak Spanish, you might need another type of interpretation. And again, the experience of drinking ayahuasca can be overwhelming. So sometimes the culture shock um, and just feeling really out of place can also get overwhelming. Um, so if you do end up drinking with an indigenous community, choose wisely. Another question to ask yourself is, do you want to interact with the healers, with the shamans? Although some retreat centers won't explicitly say this, but they try to decrease interaction, to minimize interaction between guests and healers as much as possible. And this is mainly because, especially during a 7-day or 10-day ayahuasca retreat, the healers are, they have to kind of save their energy for the upcoming ceremonies. And after attending to people for an entire night, they eat and they go to sleep, or they're kind of more introverted. So sometimes this is the case, especially for larger groups. I personally think it's really important to interact with the healers, even if you just have lunch with them or share a few words, before ceremony, and it helps nurture trust, and that's really important in the ayahuasca retreat experience. The next very important point is about group size. Try to choose a retreat center that only accepts maximum. Oh boy. So the next important thing to consider when choosing ayahuasca retreat center is group size. We recommend not attending a retreat with more than 15 guests. That's already relatively high number. I personally prefer smaller groups between 8 and 10. However, you also have to consider that retreat centers have overhead costs. They have to pay for maintenance, especially new retreat centers have construction. They have to pay for salaries. So smaller than 8 people is unlikely unless it's a very small and perhaps new retreat center. And more than 15 or more than even 20, including perhaps volunteers, becomes too many. Like the energy in the ceremonial space during a ceremony can get very intense, um, even if there is the healer or the person leading the ceremony and then 2 to 3 people assisting them. If the medicine is very strong, it's hard for them to help everyone as much as they should or as much as they could. Keep in mind that it's very common for people to need help going to the bathroom, for people to get up suddenly and possibly fall or faint. Um, and in more extreme situations, sometimes people may need to be somewhat restrained so that they don't hurt themselves. This is definitely not the norm, but it can happen. And in that case, you need to make sure that there are a couple of people there maybe helping that person. So if you imagine there's 15 or 20 people, and then during the night, 3 to 5 of them are having a very difficult time at the same time, you actually don't have enough people attending. And it's something to keep in mind. The larger the group is, the less attention that you will get. Um, so a lot of retreat centers won't say outright how large their groups are. There's a center I was actually just looking at here in Ecuador where I couldn't find any information about their retreat group size until I searched their page for an FAQ page, which wasn't easily accessible. And within that FAQ page, I found that they accepted that their retreats included between 40 to 50 people, but that was also including the volunteers and assistants. That's way too many people. That's excessive. And it indicates that it's more about the money than the healing. So that's a big red flag. And when you ask a retreat how many people they have, make sure you distinguish between the volunteers and the healers and their assistants. Volunteers are essentially other participants of the retreat or of that ceremony. A lot of volunteers maybe have only drank ayahuasca a few times before they became a volunteer. So it could be that during ceremony night they will need more help than another guest. Which leads me to the next point, your healers. I already mentioned it's great if you will be able to interact with them to a certain extent, but definitely ask who the healer will be at your retreat. A lot of ayahuasca retreat centers will work with different healers and rotate between them depending on their availability, because a lot of these curanderos are not full-time staff. They come for their retreat specifically, and then they have their other ceremonies or sometimes their own retreat centers. So make sure you ask who will be present during your retreat, and try to find out more information about them. Whether you can see a video um, or at least some kind of bio. And another important question related to that is, where does the medicine come from, and does the healer serving the medicine also prepare it? Why does this matter? It matters a lot more than you might think. The preparation of ayahuasca takes a long time, and during that time, the person preparing it is putting a lot of good energy, loving energy, good intention, often singing to the medicine. There's a connection that takes place from the moment the ayahuasca vines and the chacruna leaves are harvested. And so in that process of preparation, there's already a connection between the medicine and the healer. And this is important in not just for the energy factor, but also because the healer then knows what is in the medicine, and should only be those 2 ingredients, but nonetheless, they know exactly what's in the medicine, and they understand how strong it is, because while they prepare it, which can take 10 hours, sometimes 2 days, sometimes even more, depending on the quantities being prepared, the person preparing it will be drinking the medicine and tasting and seeing how strong it is. And that's how they know how to dose that particular batch of medicine. All of the questions I've covered so far are completely legitimate questions to ask a retreat center before you spend or invest $1,000 to $3,000 to $5,000 for a week-long or 10-day ayahuasca retreat. It's definitely within your rights to ask all these questions. My next point is related to reviews. I already kind of mentioned reviews are not always the most reliable. They can be faked nowadays. So try to look for video reviews on YouTube channels if they have it. Obviously, again, not all retreat centers or groups will have a website or a YouTube channel. But I will say I know of an ayahuasca retreat center in Ecuador that is known to pay people for to not leave negative reviews. So maybe during the retreat they noticed that person was not very happy with their experience, and to avoid getting a negative review, they pull them aside and offer them money not to leave a negative review, or they perhaps give them back some of their money. So just something to consider. Reviews definitely should not be the main factor when deciding on a safe ayahuasca retreat center. The next point is very important. It relates to preparation and integration after the retreat. As more and more people are wanting to try ayahuasca and other plant medicines, we're noticing that they come very ill prepared for the experience. It's something like they just decide, yeah, okay, I'm going to try. That sounds interesting. And they don't know what they're getting into. And while ayahuasca is healing, transformative, beautiful, heart-opening, it can be very challenging. It can be very deep. It can bring up a lot of heavy stuff. It can get super dark and scary. And on top of it, if you don't know anybody at the retreat or you don't know the healer, I mean, trust is very important. And if you don't have that trust, it can get very scary. And I've been drinking ayahuasca for nearly a decade. And I had one of the hardest experiences I've ever had in my entire life, not just on ayahuasca, in my entire life, 2 days ago in a ceremony. And I think if I were less experienced, I wouldn't quite know what to do with my experience. It would be verging on traumatic. And when people come ill prepared, when they don't take it seriously enough, and they don't have a clear understanding of what to expect, things can be scary and disappointing. I've seen people leave retreats after the first ceremony because it was much stronger than they expected. So that preparation in advance is important, and retreat centers will often help you prepare in different ways. Please heed their advice, whichever retreat center you choose. And then there's also post-retreat integration, which is also very important. You know, when you leave this beautiful cloud forest ayahuasca retreat center and you go back to your normal life in the city and the hustle and bustle and the rat race and technology and, 9 to 5 work life or something, things suddenly don't make sense. And the experiences you had on the retreat are not relevant. But they are. It's just that you have to process a lot of it. And you have to also leave space for that kind of re-climatization to your regular life. So a lot of retreat centers will offer integration resources, information. They may not be able to offer one-on-one accompaniment after the retreat, but connection through Facebook communities, WhatsApp groups, self-care rituals, meditation, resources, and guides. All of these things help you stay more connected to yourself, to nature if you can, and helping you build on your ayahuasca experiences and continue to process them. Intake questionnaires. This is really important. Wherever you reserve a spot at an ayahuasca retreat center, it should require you to fill out an intake questionnaire. If they don't, that's a huge red flag. The intake questionnaire basically helps them understand where you're at, where you're coming from, and most importantly, if you're on any meds, prescription meds, antidepressants, whether you're chronically ill, whether you have any other kind of mental health issue, bipolarism, eating disorders, allergies. I mean, all of these things matter. They need to care enough to ask you these questions. So yeah, make sure that they ask that information of you. In Latin America, it's much less common to require a health declaration before a retreat, but they will ask for things like, are you pregnant? Are you on meds? You know, kind of those more obvious ones. And I mean, I'll probably make a different video about this, but if you are on meds, it's it's your responsibility to disclose that. Or if you're dealing with mental health issues, it's your responsibility to disclose that. It's really for your own safety. And it may be that ayahuasca is not the therapeutic drug for you. You should be maybe exploring other avenues. I'm not saying that it wouldn't work or that it would be dangerous to you, but I think it's a little riskier for people dealing with, for instance, schizophrenia or bipolarism, or if you haven't weaned off of your antidepressants with enough time. So my point is that the retreat center should care about this, and that's what would make it a safe ayahuasca retreat center. And to close, one final tip is to trust your intuition. Ultimately, drinking ayahuasca is a calling, um, and when you look at all this information, you should step back and ask yourself, you know, where are you feeling called to go to drink ayahuasca, or who are you feeling called to drink with? Definitely don't base your decision on how beautiful an ayahuasca retreat center is, or what other touristic activities they might offer, or how many 5-star reviews they have. There are other really important factors to keep in mind. And to close, I will just end on encouraging you to get in touch if you are interested in finding a safe ayahuasca retreat in Ecuador. Again, Alma Healing Center can organize that for you, and we, like I said earlier, only work with 100% trustworthy healers that we have personally sat with in ceremony, that we would trust with our own lives and the lives of our loved ones. And with that, I will say goodbye.